we have done structural functional approach, we have done political culture approach, and we have done political modernization approach also, right? Further, we have done political economy approach and political sociology approach. The dictation part for political economy, political sociology is still pending, and the limitations of political modernization part is still pending. That will be available as a part of the lecture. We are going ahead and now doing the remaining approaches which are of lesser importance, but I still want to do it with you. कौन सी approach है? Political socialization approach. Any doubts with respect to the previous lectures? Please feel free to ask me. What is political socialization approach all about? There was a question this time in paper 2, whereby they asked about the political socialization of open and closed societies. This was the question. I have included it in the part of your value addition handout, and the third draft is also ready, which I'll upload. There was a question on this open and closed society. I think there's a question here. Yes, I have included this PYQ of 2025. See, your value addition handouts, they have some PYQs which fit in the flow of the lecture. Discuss the political socialization of open and closed societies. This was the question. Now see, generally this is a question from political socialization approach of comparative politics. It is not mentioned in the syllabus, but they still ask this question in 2025. So that is why I wanted to do more approaches with you. But it could be solved with some intelligent guesses and logic also. Look, if you know what is political socialization, and I have already discussed with you political socialization and recruitment as one of the inputs in the structural functional approach, whereby it is about how people get to know about political processes, political systems, political behavior in a country. And if you remember that the function is performed by family, schools, religious institutions, society, they are performing this function. So if we go by that idea, and if we add to this idea of Karl Popper in his work Open Society and Its Enemies, if you remember, has criticized Karl Marx, Hegel, and when he's doing that, he's talking about open society. So if you know what is political socialization and if you know what is open society, then you can make a logical assessment of what this question will be all about, which says discuss the political socialization of open and closed societies. Okay, now political socialization of open and closed societies. Political socialization is about political values, attitudes, and norms. If you remember, we have talked about this in political culture approach also. What is the general attitude of the society towards, let's say, political system? Is it parochial? Is it subjective? Is it participant? We talked about that. Now, from that particular approach only, we are going to understand political socialization, but in a much more, academic manner. It studies how people learn about politics. After learning, you have this attitude, which is political culture. But how you are learning about that is socialization. And because it is about political aspects, so political socialization. Had it been about economics, we would have called it economic socialization. Had it been about culture, we would have called it cultural socialization. Because it is about politics and political system, we are calling it political socialization. It studies how people learn about politics and how their political attitudes, values, and behaviors are formed over time. Once it is formed, it results into political culture. But while it is getting formed, it is political socialization. Okay, it focuses on the process through which the individuals become political beings. तो एक काम करते हैं, हम यहां पर लिखते हैं a being has converted into a political being. Okay, एक इंसान है, यहां एक पॉलिटिकल इंसान है. all the processes which happen here so that the being converts to a political being. This is where political socialization approach comes. Process, procedures, behaviors, uh, let's say the nature of authority you come in contact with, the nature of values you come in contact with, everything is going to affect what kind of political being you become. You can become a political being who is democratic in orientation. You can become a political being who is authoritarian in orientation, depending on what has happened here. If you are raised in an authoritarian family, you will easily succumb to authority. If you are raised in a liberal family, you may not easily accept authority. If you are raised in a family which is patriarchal, you will also try to emulate the same behavior. You will also try to reflect the same behavior. If that is not the case, then if you are a feminist, you will operate in that manner, depending on what this entire socialization process has been. So, political socialization is here. Once the political being has come, and once I take this political being and I talk about the entire society in which this political being lives, and what are the common norms of these people, this is where the idea becomes political culture. I hope this part is clear to you because we have already done this part of political culture. So, this process will eventually lead to a political culture. Political socialization will lead to political culture. So, in political socialization, which are the agents involved? Meaning, how people learn about politics, what are the various entities which are involved in this process, and how do we have to look at them? Family, praise, parents always praise one party. Maybe they'll praise Congress, maybe they'll praise BJP, maybe they'll praise some conservative party, maybe they'll praise some Labour Party. Labour and Conservative are examples for UK. And blame the rival. The child grows up seeing that party as our party and then votes for it also. This is political socialization. So you have always talked about how Indian National Congress is a great party because of its legacy in the Indian national movement, and your kids, they have grown by listening to all these tales during the dinner discussions, and that's how the child is going to evolve over a period of time, and that's how the child is going to look at things over a period of time. This is what is being said. So family is a very, very important institution. Schools and colleges, morning assembly with national anthem, flag, salutation, and pledges teaches us loyalty to the nation and constitution. Activities like model parliament, model UN, debates on citizenship amendment act, climate change, reservation, train the students to argue, listen to others, and respect opposition. Okay, mass media, watching a particular news channel, the nation wants to know, or following certain YouTube, Instagram influencers daily slowly builds a bias for or against specific leaders, parties, or policies. So you become biased towards them because certain information is being fed to you. Okay, dramatic coverage of terrorism or riots can increase fear, maybe nationalism also, or communal prejudice also. Hashtags and memes during elections, for example, "Main bhi Chaukidar," or meme wars in US, Europe elections, they socialize the youth into online campaign culture. So mass media is impacting, social media is impacting, religion, sermons in temples, mosques, churches, gurdwara, or caste sabhas, khaps, or community or associations. They tell about the fact that you should vote your caste candidate or religious candidate. Political parties, they tell us direct experience with the state. अगर स्मूथ एक्सपीरियंस है पासपोर्ट लेने में, ड्राइविंग लाइसेंस लेने में, you will say no, the state is good. But if this experience is not smooth, you will end up criticizing the state. So all these are agents or institutions in political socialization. How people Political socialization is about how people think about politics. It deals with processes associated with how such connect happens. Okay. So this is what political socialization is all about. A being converted to a political being via all these different kinds of ideas to which you are getting uh, exposed, or different experiences which you have during growing up, or different experiences you have with state, or different kind of information being fed to you by media or social media. So you become from a being to political being. Okay. Now, after this, you should also remember the agents. So one or two examples, that's it. So agent, family, agent or structures through which socialization happens. Family, peer group. Then we talked about media, social media. Okay. Then we talked about role of religious institutions, religious and educational institutions एक साथ कर देते हैं. तो nationalism educational institutions में सिखाया जाएगा, religious institutions में loyalty towards religion सिखाया जाएगा. Then we have direct exposure to state activities. This is going to influence us. Okay. Civil society may impact us. So rather let's not write civil society. Peer group में civil society हम include कर लेंगे. ठीक है, ऐसे कोई hard and fast rule नहीं होता. Okay, political parties ये मिस हो गया. Political parties लिख लेते हैं, ये important होते हैं. Okay, so you should know these agents. Once you know the agents, once you know the structures through which socialization happens, and you know what socialization is, now we come to the concept of open and closed society. So basically the idea of open and closed society is that those societies which value freedom, choice, and the societies which are largely built on the freedom of speech and expression, and they continuously talk about how using this freedom of speech and expression we can have multiple interest groups coming up, multiple parties coming up, and this leads to continuous bargaining, continuous conflicts, continuous change of policies. This is what is the open society for us. So obviously open society's example is the Western countries who value freedom and who value political liberties, and closed societies, as you can logically guess, they are those societies which are largely authoritarian in nature. They don't allow for unfettered freedom of speech and expression. And here when I say unfettered, मतलब है बहुत ज्यादा freedom of speech and expression नहीं देते हैं. Unfettered तो liberal world भी नहीं देता. Open society also don't give. But the idea in closed society beings, freedom is not a value which is valued too much. Okay, it's not considered that important. So discipline is more important, duties are more important, duty orientation is there, community orientation is there, individualistic orientations are not there. That is what is the closed society. Okay, so as you can see here, basic idea is society based on freedom, criticism, and change. Whereas closed societies, society based on order, obedience, and stability. So open societies will be always, open to change. Whereas closed societies, they would not want to change, so they are more conservative, they are more status quoist, and that is why it is written here. They focus more on stability. Okay, and for stability, you need obedient citizens. You don't want citizens who come up with radical ideas, which they can come up in open societies. Political system is usually democratic, competitive elections, parties, opposition parties, accountable government, generally authoritarian, power is concentrated, opposition is weak or banned, and there is limited rule of law. Freedom of expression high, freedom of expression low. Pluralism high. Why? Many ideologies will prosper. Here limited. Why? Here low. Why? Because you cannot allow for various viewpoints to coexist. So you will not see that happening. Example, you can all say China, North Korea, Russia. Okay. Uh, but better example is North Korea. Because China is not the kind of country which China is made out to be. China is a country which takes care of its people, and it provides a healthy freedom of speech and expression also. Not in the way, obviously, the West provides. Information and media, this is open flow of information. Here there is controlled information. Okay, state run, Global Times of China, if you know that. Global Times, state run, major media outlet of China, or tightly regulated. Role of citizen. Citizen is seen as an active citizen with rights, duties, and capacity to influence policy. Citizen is seen as an obedient subject. Change and innovation, encourages reforms. Here, they don't encourage reform, they value more continuity and stability. Examples are Nordic countries, EU, Canada. Examples are North Korea, or some one party or military regimes. So these are open and closed societies. Now we know what is political socialization, we know the agents, we know what is open and closed society. Now the question comes, discuss the political socialization of open and closed societies. Meaning, why people in open societies are the way they are, and why people in closed societies are the way they are. People in open societies will value freedom. People in closed societies will value obedience or discipline more. So this you have to discuss. Now I hope you can discuss this, because what you have to do is you have to write the basic features of open society, and then you have to relate how uh, these features they lead to the creation of a certain viewpoint in the individuals. Can I say open societies, because of their features, will lead to the creation of a participant political culture? Can I say that? Or will it lead to the creation of a subject political culture? Which political culture will be developed in a open society? Tell me. What kind of political culture will emerge in an open society? What do you think? Any inputs? I'll read this in short part. In short, political socialization in open societies, it works through free competing agencies and ideas, while in closed societies, it works through centralized control and indoctrination. Though in both cases, the deeper purpose is to maintain the existing political system. Tell me one thing. If you can answer this question, I'll say you have great understanding. How do liberal countries ensure that despite all the freedom which is given to you, the question is, how do liberal countries, the Western world, ensures that despite all the freedom which is given to you, still the system remains stable? Here, the assumption is that because the freedoms are given to you, you will come out with your views, people will follow you, you may want some radical changes also, you may want some revolutionary changes also. But despite that, the liberal state is not unstable. It continues to function in a stable manner. How is it able to do so? Can you tell me this thing? How is liberal country able to do so? Because authoritarian country can simply say that no, this liberal this freedom of speech and expression and the associated activities of pressure groups, political parties, we are not allowing all these things, so they can maintain their stability. Tell me, how do Western liberal countries ensure stability despite providing for all these things, which can be a recipe for change, radical change, revolutionary change, which can breed instability in the system? How do they take care of this? Very, very important. If you can answer me this question, I'll say you have great understanding. Okay. And the way they are able to do so, in that also, I would want some different perspectives. Okay, because there is no single perspective to this. So if you can do that, do let me know. I'll get to know if you know a little bit more details. Done. This is the political socialization approach. Very, very easy. Here, the definition has to be has to be kept in mind. The agents or the structures have to be kept in mind. Plus, the open and closed society idea has to be kept in mind. So any question, if it will come from this part only. Done. Okay, the answer is coming because of mixed political culture, civic culture. Okay, it's a good answer. I'm expecting more. Can you think on the lines of political theory? How stability is maintained? Can you think from the perspective of liberals and Marxists? How they do that? Try to think, and if something comes to your mind, let me know. Otherwise, I'll let you know. Next approach is the psychological approach. What is the psychological approach? Okay, before I talk about the psychological approach, let me show you a question. Again, a question of this year. It's a UPSC PYQ of 2025. Discuss the psychological approach to the study of comparative politics. The psychological approach to the study of comparative politics. Very simple. Look, to understand the psychological approach, actually it's very easy. It's simply about psychology of a political agent. But what we'll try to do is, we'll try through the psychological approach, we'll try to have a framework. If you remember, we have shifted the definition of state to political system, right? Systems approach, state is called as political system. And this political system should study not only formal institutions, but also informal institutions. I hope you remember this. You should not only study executive, legislature, judiciary, you should also study pressure groups, political parties, social movements, okay, revolutions, okay, change, class, caste, economy, these kinds of factors and their linkages. This is political system which we have divided. Which we have conceptualized in systems approach. Now this political system further consists of, again, one classification I'm making. It consists of institutions. It consists of actors. Actors will show behavior, and institutions, they will make rules or norms or regulations. Can I say that? And when we study the political system in the modern comparative approaches, we say we are studying institutions also, and they were already studied since a long period of time. Traditional approaches were already doing this. Now we have come to the informal part in which the actors analysis also comes, because actors, they exhibit behavior. So we will need to know that we have to analyze that what was the underlying ideas which motivate different leaders. Why JL Nehru used to think that India Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, or why Indira Gandhi was able to make the assessment that the US will not be able to force India during 1971, or why Modi uh, believes that cultural assertion is important on the world stage today. So, comparative politics, while it is trying to understand the political system, will, as a part of informal factors, come to the actors also, their behavior, and will try to understand their behavior. And this is where the psychological approach comes into picture. We want to know how the psyche or the psychology of different actors is influenced. That is what is the psychological approach to comparative politics. The psychological approach explains political behavior by focusing on human attitudes, emotions, perceptions, personality traits, and decision making processes. Instead of analyzing only institutions or structures, it studies why individuals and groups think and act the way they do in political situations. Meaning, why individual actors, or if I make it a group of actors. Don't you think if I make it a group of actors, I will reach here? Why they act in a certain manner. So, what is something which motivates you? What is your psychology in life, in addition to your philosophy in life? What are the things which influence you? What are the values which you treasure? This is something which we want to know. Okay. The approach argues that political actions are often shaped by fear, anger, identity, loyalty, trust, prejudice, and hope, rather than purely rational calculations. Now, listen to me very carefully. This helps explain voting patterns, participation in protests, support for democracy, political violence, leadership behavior. सुनो, ये एक्टर है, ये इसका बिहेवियर है. ये बिहेवियर कैसा हो सकता है? It can be rational, it can be irrational, right? In politics, Donald Trump is a reflection of irrational behavior. Okay. Irrational में इमोशंस आ जाएंगी. ठीक है. लव, हेट्रेड, fear, envy, all of them will come. Rational, obviously, reason will come. Okay. Now, what influences people? Do reason influence people? If yes, they'll become the part of, as per Plato, ruling class. If passions dominate, they'll become a part of producer class. But both the things are present. I don't know how many of you remember. Do you remember the dialectics of enlightenment? If you remember the dialectics of enlightenment, I'll be extremely happy that you remember something from the initial 15-20 lectures. Dialectics of enlightenment, critical theory. There we talked about rational and irrational. How rational and irrational go hand in hand. If rationality has led to liberalism, socialism, then irrationality has led to fascism, and how they go hand in hand. That is by the dialectics of enlightenment. तो मेरा बिहेवियर, पॉलिटिकल बिहेवियर, कौन बिहेव कर रहा है? मोदी जी बिहेव कर रहे हैं, बराक ओबामा, डोनाल्ड ट्रंप, जी जिनपिंग, ओके, political leaders, how do they act? They act out of rational concerns and they are irrational both. The psychological aspect would want to understand why you acted in a certain manner, the behavior which you exhibited, whether this or that, why it was exhibited. That is what the psychological approach is. A very good example of psychological approach is the Brexit referendum in UK. So when the Brexit referendum happened in UK, and this is the story of 2016, I think 2016, if I'm not wrong, 2016. A very unique situation happened in Britain. There are two parties in Britain, two major parties, Conservative Party and the Labour Party. Both the parties are unable to decide whether they, as in the UK or the Britain, they should stay with the European Union or they should come out of the European Union. And to that extent, because of this sharp divide amongst the political actors, they are unable to decide. उनसे डिसाइड ही नहीं हो पा रहा है कि यू में रहें या यू से बाहर आ जाए. तो फिर वो कहते हैं हमसे तो हो नहीं पाया, लोगों को ही पूछ लेते हैं. So they put it on people and then the referendum happens. And in this referendum also, it's a very, very close fight. And 52% of people, they vote in favor of Britain exiting the EU. And then that process started, and eventually today, Britain is not a part of EU. But back then, when it started, 48% people are saying that no, you should stay with EU. But merely by a lead of 4%, the proponents of UK leaving EU, they won. Now, where is political psychology approach here? The tendency or the understanding of people to leave European Union was based on some psychological factors. A big section of the population believed that it was the immigration, it was the loosening of national identity of Britain, which were responsible for Brexit. Look, Britain deliberately came into EU because they realized that there are benefits. Rational argument. If we are creating European Union, which liberal theory comes to your mind of international relations? Through the perspective of which liberal theory can we explain that more countries would want to be a part of EU? Can you tell me through which liberal theory can we explain this? %48 people don't want, 52% want. And now the argument which is given is a lot of people of Britain, they have a fear that their British identity will be lost. And because of being in a part of EU, they have to open their borders. And there is this huge immigration which is happening in UK, which is helping London also and which is problematic for London also. But yeah, the decision-making aspect was largely associated with how people perceived their association with EU. For 52%, this association reflected low returns in economy. This association reflected giving up on national identity. This association reflected the fear that immigrants are going to take more and more jobs of the people of UK. Similarly, in India, caste identity or emotional attachment to a leader often influences voting behavior more than policy issues. So यहाँ पर वोटिंग किसके बेसिस पर होती है? करिश्मा के बेस पर. मोदी जी के नाम पर बिहार इलेक्शन भी चल रहा है, मोदी जी के नाम पर हरियाणा इलेक्शन भी चल रहा है. Why? People give importance to charisma, people give importance to important leaders, and that's how their psyche works. their psyche works on uh, these parameters. Okay, so this is something which the psychological approach tries to understand. Look here, the psychological approach also examines leaders' personalities, such as charisma or authoritarian traits, to understand policy choices and policy outcomes. Overall, it provides insight into how individual and collective psychology shapes political systems, helping scholars compare why similar institutions function differently across countries. Okay, so the political behavior, the behavior part, the informal part that is being targeted in this approach, and the psyche of why action has been taken by that same particular person, why it is taken in that particular fashion only. This is studied by psychological approach. Any doubts at this point of time, feel free to ask me. So we are done with the political psychology approach. We are done with the idea of political socialization, open and closed society. Now we come to the political simulation approach. Political simulation approach, as the name suggests, is very easy. It tries to simulate. Simulate is, let's try to predict. But this try is scientific. Okay, based on numbers, data. What is political simulation approach doing? It is trying to simulate situations and see what outcomes can be expected. Okay. What is the essential meaning of this? Let's say I want to make an assessment as to how the voters are going to vote in Bihar. What is the parameter which is going to give me more votes in Bihar? For that, I take the help of 10 political scientists, and I bring 5 sociologists, I bring 5 economists, I bring 5 psychologists, I bring other people who have knowledge, and I put all these people in a room. And now 40 people, they are providing insights to various political leaders as to how you can win Bihar elections. One will say give freebies, other will say uh, the liquor ban should be removed. Another will say we should focus on caste equation. Another will say no, focus on the national identity and religion. Some other may say that focus on development, and everybody is going to bring some inputs depending on their expertise. And now we want to devise a model using mathematics, using statistics, that we keep on changing our input and it keeps on telling us what outputs can be expect or outcomes can be expected. For example, if I use a parameter of religion, caste, development, and freebies in the ratio X, Y, Z, A, then this will give me 150 seats. However, if I increase the ratio of freebies, okay, by P% in some blocks and districts, and all this will be done in an empirical fashion, then there is a possibility that this number can go to 170 also. If we play the caste card in Q proportion, then it will lead to 165 seats. So now prediction models are being created. That is simulation. We are trying to simulate what will be the outcomes. And one of the best ways to understand simulation is the exit polls. The exit poll results, which are the exit polls which are conducted and the results are being published by big media houses, what they do is they collect some information at the booth level after the voting, and then they use mathematical and statistical models to extrapolate that to other areas, rather to entire India, and then they predict that अब की बार 400 पार होगा. But जरूरी तो नहीं वो ठीक होगा, रादर इस बार हुआ भी नहीं. सो जब ये होता है तो हमारा फोकस क्या है कि ये सिमुलेशन कैसे बनानी है, और पॉलिटिकल सिमुलेशन अप्रोच ये करने की कोशिश करती है. फाइन, this is what the political simulation approach is. It gained momentum with computers and systems theory, politics simulated via mathematical and computer models. It is used for prediction, policy experimentation, and teaching. It utilizes agent-based models, game theory, scenario analysis, can simulate collision building, conflict escalation, and policy impacts. Allows controlled what if. मतलब controlled what if analysis का मतलब है कि अगर हम एलओसी पर ज्यादा डिप्लॉयमेंट कर दे तो पाकिस्तान कैसे रिएक्ट करेगा. तो इसके लिए वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड पाकिस्तान साइकोलॉजी, पाकिस्तान कैपेबिलिटीज, अभी पाकिस्तान में क्या मूड चल रहा है, अभी वहां के जनरल है कैसे सोच रहे हैं, अभी इंटरनेशनल डोमेन में क्या हो रहा है. दे आर गेटिंग अ लॉट ऑफ सपोर्ट फ्रॉम ट्रम्प. So during this situation, there is a possibility that Pakistan will take a aggressive stand. If we do that, obviously हम करके नहीं देख सकते हैं, हमें पहले ही प्रेडिक्ट करना है कि अगर A किया तो ये रिएक्शन आएगा, अगर B किया तो ये रिएक्शन आ सकता है. And if we are trying to do all these things, this is a political simulation approach. So you do it in international politics all the time as a part of game theory. You do it in domestic politics as a part of exit polls. This is also the result of modern comparative politics जब ये approach develop की गई है. And I'm just telling you the basic aspects of this approach, but this is a very detailed approach, and इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा studies होती हैं, इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा models बनाए जाते हैं, prediction करने की कोशिश की जाती है. Political analysts like the one who contested elections this time from the Jan Swaraj party, प्रशांत किशोर की बात कर रहा हूँ. He used to do such kind of political analysis for parties earlier. So it's a very interesting field also. I know people who are a part of this, who do these studies, who do these experiments, theoretical experiments, कंप्यूटर में डेटा डालते हैं, फिर आउटपुट निकालने की कोशिश करते हैं, और कुछ प्रेडिक्ट करने की कोशिश करते हैं. So this is a very dynamic area on which a lot of work is done. And when we look at this, then we get to know that there are multiple implications also of this. Okay. So nevertheless, the point is, this is political simulation approach. What you need to know is just the basics of what this approach is. So if somebody tomorrow asks you, what is a political simulation approach, you should be able to write a 10 marker. That's it. Otherwise, it has never been asked in the examination. ठीक है, तो ये आपको पता होना चाहिए. Okay. Now, let's take the discussion forward. Okay, next is the behavioral approach in comparative politics. After doing the political simulation approach, next is the behavioral approach. When we talk about behavioral approach, it is nothing but behavioralism. It is nothing but usage of science, mathematics, statistics, verification, hypothesis, value neutral studies, the David Easton's 8 characteristics, if you remember. This is the same idea here. So all the studies which were done with this framework, they are simply called as behavioral approach studies. The systems approach is also an example of this, but it is studied separately. Here we want to explicitly say that if I am doing my study which is absolutely value neutral, For example, I told you earlier also, if I talk about the voting behavior of voting behavior of people. If you remember, we have done in paper one the how caste, religion, ethnicity they affect the politics, and how development factors, how regional factors, uh, they also impact the politics in India. This we studied as a part of the determinants of voter behavior. So, voting behavior of people, if I'm trying to study here, I am not making any kind of value judgments. मैं ये बात ही नहीं कर रहा हूं कि क्या ठीक है क्या गलत. मेरा सारा एम्फोसिस कहाँ है? ट्रू और फॉल्स पे. क्या होता है इस पे फोकस है. आई एम ट्राइंग टू बी डिस्क्रिप्टिव without providing any kind of a value judgment. इफ यू रिमेंबर बिहेवियरल अप्रोच की कुछ स्टडीज थी जो हमने की थी, एलिटिस्ट थ्योरी ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. रिमेंबर, फॉर पावर, in which the elitist school said that democracy is nothing but circulation of power amongst elites, or democracy is nothing but the circulation of power amongst groups. रॉबर्ट डाल. तो ये बिहेवियरल अप्रोच का एग्जांपल है. मैंने बता दिया ऐसे चल रहा है. अब मुझे इस बात को लेकर मुझसे गुस्सा मत हो जाओ कि मैंने कहा डेमोक्रेसी तो देखो है तो ऐसी ही. तो तुम मुझसे मत गुस्सा हो जाना कि मैंने तुमको कुछ गलत बताया. मैंने तुमको बस सच बताया है. तो बिहेवियरल अप्रोच इज गोइंग टू फोकस ऑन वैल्यू न्यूट्रलिटी. डिस्क्रिप्टिव एनालिसिस is going to focus on hypothesis building. हाइपोथेसिस की जगह पैराडाइम का वर्ड भी यूज किया जाएगा. हाइपोथेसिस बनाओ, पैराडाइम बनाओ. आफ्टर दैट व्हाट यू डू, यू क्वांटिफाई इट. क्वांटिटेटिव मेथड्स डिप्लॉय किए जाएं. ओके, देन यू डू सम verification also. Okay, then you make some generalizations also, and that is when the political laws can be carved out. तो political law बनाने की बात है. जैसे नेचुरल साइंस में लॉ बन गए, फोर्स इज इक्वल टू मास इनटू एक्सेलरेशन. ये एक लॉ बना आफ्टर न्यूटन डिड ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स. Similarly, in politics, we'll make some laws by doing all these things. So all these things already exist, but they are all value laden studies. वो value neutral studies नहीं है. तो हम value neutral जब करने गए behavioral approach में, David Easton's 8 points which suggest how the behavioral approaches have to work. This is basically what is the behavioral approach to modern comparative politics. Same चीज, absolutely same. ठीक है. Empirical and observable. Look at what people actually do. Do what constitutions, not what constitutions say. Value neutral uses surveys, opinion polls, interviews. Okay, that is the basic idea. So I'll not go into the explanation of this again. ठीक है. Done. That is what is all about the approaches to comparative politics. We are done with the approaches now, and I'll be doing with you one more topic today, and then we'll end the class. End the class as in the live class will end, and then I'll record a dictation lecture for you. Okay. Any doubts with respect to this? Feel free to ask me. Now, let me take you here. There is a question, very simple question, which I want to ask to you. The question is that what is the subject matter of comparative politics? If I ask you that, okay, there is something called comparative politics, and if I ask you what all things do the comparative politics studies, Okay. So what will be your answer? That is what I want to know. That what are the subject areas of comparative politics? Like what exactly are they studying? What's their purpose? So what I have done is I have included this entire part here for you. Subject matter of comparative politics. What do I study? Here, although whatever approaches we have done, through that you can take a lot of things, but I want to give you this content in one place. Subject matter of comparative politics. So when I talk about the subject matter of comparative politics, I talk about the study of political system, the black box. We study this as a part of systems approach. Different types of political system, democracies, authoritarian, totalitarian, hybrid regimes, then variations within democracies, presidential, parliamentary, federal, unitary, all of these are studied. Okay. For example, India versus USA, parliamentary form of government versus presidential form of government. How does the executive accountability differ here? Or India versus China, one is democratic, other is authoritarian. How does political participation, dissent, and policy making, how they vary across India and China depending on these parameters? Then political institutions. This is from the institutional and legal approach. Here we study about executive, legislature, and judicial wings. Okay. There is going to be some overlap also. We are going to study electoral systems. We are going to study Indian federalism and compare it with US federalism. We are going to study how India has made anti-defection law. So this is a part of political institutions. यहाँ पर काम करते हैं और institutions लिख लेते हैं. तो bureaucracy भी लिख लेते हैं. We can write here. What else can we write in the political institutions here? Executive, legislature, judiciary, bureaucracy. Okay, electoral systems, very important. Whether you are going to follow first past the post system or you are going to follow the proportional representation system. Okay. Then you have political behavior, in which, if you remember, we study the psychological approach here, political behavior. We study the political culture things here. So if you see here, political behavior, voting behavior, electoral participation, political socialization, public opinion, social movements. Okay. How caste identity shapes voting in India versus how class identity shapes voting in Europe. Political culture, the value systems, beliefs. We have talked about this already. Okay. State-society relations is primarily about interaction between pressure groups and state, or media and state. Political development, it talks about modernization elements, whether and to what extent you are modernized. Political economy and development talks about how the economic structure impacts, and for that, what kind of issues will you study? Welfare policies you will study, class politics you will study, globalization you will study. So the examiner is going to expect that you tell all these things. For example, in the political behavior, you'll have to talk about caste-based analysis will be done, or class-based analysis will be done, or simply you can write identity-based analysis will be done, plus psychological beliefs of individual actors and groups will be assessed. Okay, that is what we are going to do. Then we talked about the study around pressure groups, political parties, social movements. All this will also be a part of the state and the civil society. relations. Then we'll talk about in the political economy, we'll talk about development strategies, we'll talk about welfare policies, we'll talk about laissez-faire state, we'll talk about inequality, we'll talk about globalization. I hope you remember dependency, Emmanuel Wallerstein, political economy. Okay. Here, political sociology is also included. Okay, this is what we are going to talk about. Then, okay, voter turnouts, that will come later on. Yeah, uh, let's say आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स वी कैन पुट इट अर्लियर रूट सेल्फ जहां डाला है, तो ऐसे कोई हार्ड एंड फास्ट रूल नहीं है, यहाँ पे ओवरलैपिंग भी मिलेगी तुम्हें. हाँ, यहाँ पे ये इंपॉर्टेंट है. टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट योर स्ट्रक्चर्स हैव डेवलप्ड, कैन यू, आर योर स्ट्रक्चर्स well differentiated, well developed, well modernized? This will show secularization trends. This will show democratization. Okay, so questions on democratization, questions on revolutions, questions on social change. Okay, this kind of analysis, if it is done, it will be as a part of our understanding of comparative politics only. It will be classified under political development or political modernization approach. Okay, if your institution is not able to function well, there will be a revolution, political decay by Huntington, if you remember this part. State building, institutional challenges, तो यहाँ democratization की बात है. इकोनॉमी हमने पहले ही बात कर ली है. पब्लिक पॉलिसी एंड करप्शन, गवर्नेंस, करप्शन, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिफॉर्म, सर्विस डिलीवरी. अगर इसकी बात होती है, फॉर एग्जांपल हाउ पॉलिसी स्प्रेड अक्रॉस इंडियन स्टेट्स, राइट टू एजुकेशन, पीडीएस versus policy learning across countries, European integration, conditional cash transfers from Latin America, corruption की बात, ई गवर्नेंस की बात, how they impact. ठीक है, तो मॉडर्न कंपैरेटिव पॉलिटिक्स में यहाँ पर आफ्टर दिस you should also write public policy and governance. So public policy and governance, this is another area of study. यहाँ पर कुछ लिखना तो नहीं है, नहीं वैसे जरूरत नहीं है. हाँ, एक ये लिख सकते हो पब्लिक पॉलिसी एंड गवर्नेंस में, करप्शन, गुड गवर्नेंस, या करप्शन एंड सर्विस डिलीवरी लिख लो, बहुत है. कि सर्विस डिलीवरी हो रही है तो गवर्नेंस हो रही है, करप्शन हो रही है तो गवर्नेंस खराब है, तो इसकी बात की जा रही है. पब्लिक पॉलिसी में ऑक्शन बेस्ड जो लाइसेंसिंग है, या ओपन ऑक्शन बेस्ड स्पेक्ट्रम की एलोकेशन होनी चाहिए, तो वहां पे ट्रांसपेरेंसी होनी चाहिए. ये पढ़ाई करती है, नहीं होगी तो क्या होगा, ये पढ़ाई होगी. This is very important. How states manage diversity, minority rights, federalism, secessionism, civil wars, because इंडिया में बहुत देखने को मिलता है. So this is also another part which has to do more with ethnicity, culture, and nationalism. So next area of study is how ethnicity, culture, and nationalism, they impact the politics of different countries. One subject matter, ethnicity, culture, nationalism's impact on politics. One subject matter, discussions around public policy and governance to check what kind of corruption levels exist and what is the service delivery. Then political modernization is studied, whether you have become secularized, democratized, or what are the reasons why revolutions come, what are the reasons why protests are happening. Then we talk about development policies, welfare policies, inequality, globalization. This is from the perspective of political economy. So this way, all this is a subject matter, if you see here, of comparative politics. It starts with the study of political systems, macro analysis, democracy, authoritarianism, parliamentary, presidential. Then it goes towards the political behavior, political culture, political modernization, political socialization, and ethnicity, culture, nationalism, public policy, how all of them are going to impact in one way or the other in our understanding of what is happening. This all is the subject matter of comparative politics. So you can write the subject matter of comparative politics by basically going through all the approaches also. There also you'll get to know what you are doing. But in my opinion, stick to this framework. It will really help you. This framework: formal, informal, then here informal institutions and actors, here formal institutions which are executive, legislature, judiciary. Okay. And actors, formal actors. So here you understand PM, president. Okay. Here what you will understand: politicians who may not necessarily be prime minister. We'll study them, or we'll study bureaucracy also. We'll study the courts also, judiciary also. That's how we make our broad understanding. It will help us generate content in an easy manner. ठीक है, चलो, done. So we end the class here.